They laughed at XRP. They dismissed it as a banker's coin, a centralized relic, a project with no true place in a decentralized future. They said it was finished, especially after the SEC came for Ripple. But now, the tables have turned, quietly, unmistakably, and with serious consequences. Because while retail investors chased hype coins and meme cycles, the US government was watching something else. And today, the very system that tried to cripple Ripple is moving in lockstep with its original blueprint. From real-time cross-border settlement to tokenized dollar liquidity and global payment rails, the alignment between Ripple's infrastructure and US monetary policy is no longer a theory. It's unfolding. This isn't some crypto conspiracy. This is a controlled transition away from the legacy banking structure and into a blockchain-powered financial network. And if you're still thinking XRP is just another altcoin, you're about to miss the most important pivot in modern financial history. So pause. Really pause. This moment isn't just a headline. It's a signal that separates those who understood the blueprint from those still clinging to narratives that are already obsolete. Before we dive deep into the documents, the policy shifts, the Ripple integrations happening behind the scenes, do this right now. Subscribe if you're tired of noise and ready to understand the architecture of the new financial world. Save this video because you'll need to come back to this as these events unfold. Share it with anyone still laughing at XRP, because what's coming next isn't comedy. It's consequence. This isn't just a crypto comeback story. This is Ripple's quiet revenge, and it's being written by the very hands that once tried to erase it. Let's break it down. Ripple's vision versus reality then and now. Let's rewind the clock. The year is 2012. Bitcoin is just beginning to capture the world's imagination. Ethereum doesn't exist yet. Most people still think blockchain is just a buzzword. And then Ripple Labs enters the scene. But Ripple wasn't just launching another coin or promising another pump. They came in with something bigger, something bolder, a vision to build what they called the Internet of Value. Not just a place for traders and crypto diehards, but a global infrastructure for transferring value as seamlessly as sending an email. One that could connect banks, payment providers, corporations, and central banks, all in real time. The core of their mission: instant global payments, cross-border transactions without friction, settlement in seconds, not days, a world beyond SWIFT, beyond remittance delays, beyond hidden fees. In short, Ripple wasn't playing the same game as everyone else. They weren't chasing memes, forks, or hype. They were aiming at the core plumbing of the financial world, and that made people very uncomfortable. Because for the first time, a crypto project wasn't trying to burn the system down. It was trying to replace it from the inside. But here's what happened next. They were ridiculed, dismissed as too centralized, mocked as the banker's coin, accused of being government-friendly in a world that prized decentralization at all costs. While other projects bragged about fighting regulators, Ripple made a controversial choice. They engaged with them. They met with central banks. They discussed compliance. They talked about liquidity, KYC, AML, and cross-border standards. In other words, they took crypto seriously. And the world, it laughed. Until it didn't. Because just as Ripple began gaining traction, just as banks began to take notice, the hammer dropped. A lawsuit from the U.S. Securities and Exchange Commission. The message was clear: you don't belong. It was the kind of legal drama most projects wouldn't survive. Years in court, billions of dollars on the line, reputations in the fire. For many, this was supposed to be Ripple's funeral. But while the world watched for a collapse, Ripple did something unexpected. They kept building. While hype-driven projects were imploding left and right, caught in scandals, hacks, and Ponzi tokenomics, Ripple stayed focused. They expanded global corridors, secured licenses in key jurisdictions, onboard banks and enterprise clients, hired top legal minds and compliance officers, created a product not just for DeFi degens, but for the real world. They didn't build for headlines. They built for longevity. And now, fast forward to today, and something stunning is happening. The U.S. government, which once tried to sideline Ripple, is now embracing many of the very concepts Ripple introduced more than a decade ago. We're seeing increased talk of real-time payment infrastructure, government exploration of cross-border digital assets, a growing shift toward instant settlement systems, regulatory frameworks that look eerily similar to Ripple's compliance-first approach. This isn't just a change in tone. It's a shift in trajectory. And it's not a coincidence. It's a sign. Because while the world mocked Ripple for working with regulators, those same regulators are now crafting policies that mirror Ripple's original blueprint. A blueprint they mocked and are now following. So, the only real question is, who was early and who will be too late? Because if you're still thinking of XRP as just another coin, you're not paying attention. The next financial era is being written right now, and Ripple isn't knocking on the door anymore. They're already in the building. The lawsuit was a smokescreen, what they didn't want you to see. Let's address what everyone thinks they understand. The SEC versus Ripple lawsuit. December 2020. Out of nowhere, the Securities and Exchange Commission filed a bombshell lawsuit against Ripple Labs. The charge? Selling unregistered securities through its XRP token. The headlines were brutal. Ripple in trouble. XRP dead in the water. U.S. government declares war on Ripple. And overnight, exchanges delisted XRP. Retail investors dumped. Influencers ran for cover. Panic swept the market. The entire crypto space watched, stunned, as Ripple, one of the most compliant and institutionally aligned projects in the space, became the poster child of regulatory punishment. But here's the question the headlines never asked. Why Ripple? Why now? Because Ripple wasn't just another crypto startup. It wasn't building meme coins or decentralized casinos. It wasn't burning tokens for hype or relying on influencer gimmicks. Ripple was playing a completely different game. One that threatened the very mechanics of global money. While most projects tried to replace banks, Ripple did the unthinkable. It sought to empower them. It wasn't anti-establishment. It was infrastructure for the establishment. Working hand-in-hand with legacy financial institutions. Santander, SBI, PNC, American Express. Not as a side hustle. Not as a test. But as full-scale integrations. Billions of dollars were moving through Ripple's on-demand liquidity, ODL corridors. Solving the age-old problem of slow, expensive, opaque cross-border payments. And let's be honest, that made Ripple a threat. Not a threat to national security but to control, to dominance, to status quo. So what did the government do? They sued. But not to kill Ripple. Not to destroy XRP. They needed a smokescreen, a delay, public spectacle. Because while the retail crowd focused on YouTube lawyers and court filings, Ripple was building. Silently, strategically, globally. They expanded operations across the Middle East, where regulatory clarity moves faster than Western politics. They deepened their presence in Asia, where digital payments aren't a novelty, they're a necessity. They formed new corridors in Latin America, bringing liquidity and speed to underserved markets. They weren't just talking about the future of finance. They were deploying it. They filed patents around programmable money, interoperable ledgers, and tokenized real-world assets, long before those buzzwords hit Washington's radar. Meanwhile, in the U.S., policymakers began floating the idea of instant settlement, real-time payments, CBDCs. Sound familiar? Because what Ripple built in the shadows, the U.S. is now trying to recreate in broad daylight. It's no longer a conspiracy theory. It's a pattern. The lawsuit wasn't about stopping Ripple. It was about studying Ripple. And now, the U.S. is implementing the exact mechanisms Ripple pioneered under the guise of innovation. This is not a defeat. It's vindication. Ripple didn't fold. It forged ahead. And now, the very structure they built is becoming the blueprint for tomorrow's monetary policy. So before you write off XRP, ask yourself this. Why is the government walking the path Ripple already paved? Next, we break down exactly how Ripple's tech stack, dismissed as centralized banker coin nonsense just years ago, is now being mirrored by the same institutions that once mocked it. You're going to want to see this. Let's go deeper. Ripple's blueprint becomes policy. You've heard the phrase, first they ignore you, then they laugh at you, then they fight you, then you win. Well, Ripple isn't just winning. Its entire playbook is being repurposed at the highest levels of U.S. financial infrastructure. Let's connect the dots. When Ripple launched, it had a clear and controversial mission: to replace slow, expensive, and outdated international payment rails with instant, trustless settlement. At the time, this was radical. Swift transfers took days, intermediaries took fees, and transparency was optional at best. Ripple said, "We can do better." They built on-demand liquidity, ODL, to eliminate pre-funded accounts, solving a trillion-dollar problem in global finance. They developed XRPL, a decentralized ledger built for speed, compliance, and tokenization, not hype. They built relationships not just with fintech startups, but with central banks and Tier 1 financial institutions. And now, let's look at what the U.S. government is suddenly rolling out. FedNow, launched in 2023, promises instant settlement for domestic payments. Sound familiar? Ripple was doing this with XRP years earlier globally. Tokenized assets and programmable dollars are now a key focus of both the Federal Reserve and institutions like BlackRock. Ripple has long discussed tokenizing real estate, commodities, and fiat on the XRPL. CBDCs are now in active development, and Ripple is quietly providing technical support and infrastructure for multiple countries' pilots. Yes, Ripple, the company that was once fighting for survival, is now helping governments create digital currencies. And here's where it gets even clearer. Ripple was the only crypto company invited to participate in the Digital Dollar Project's discussions. They're not being shut out. They're being consulted. This isn't just a comeback story, this is a strategic integration. Ripple built the tools. The government watched. And now it's copying the blueprint. And here's the kicker: XRP, the asset that powered Ripple's tech, wasn't just designed to survive regulation. It was designed to thrive within it. So while retail was distracted by lawsuits and market FUD, Ripple was embedding itself in the future of money. Next, we'll talk about what this really means for XRP holders, and why this shift is just the beginning of a seismic financial transformation you're not supposed to see until it's too late. Stay sharp. Let's go deeper. XRP's role in the new financial order. Let's stop pretending this is just about remittances or fast payments. Ripple's moves, and the government's response, point to something far bigger. XRP is being positioned as a bridge asset in a post-dollar multi-rail financial system. That might sound extreme, until you realize the following. The US isn't just exploring instant settlement. It's exploring interoperability, the ability for different currencies, networks, and systems to transact seamlessly. Ripple has patents, partnerships, and platforms built precisely for this. XRP isn't just a utility token, it's a liquidity engine. Can move between fiat, crypto, CBDCs, tokenized stocks in seconds. The Fed is talking about neutral settlement assets that can sit between walled gardens. Guess what fits that definition? Not Bitcoin, not Ethereum, XRP. Meanwhile, Ripple is working on real-time cross-border settlements with countries that don't align with US banking systems. This means XRP as a neutral global standard is no longer a theory. It's being piloted. Look at the trend. The more friction the global monetary system faces, the more valuable XRP's design becomes. This isn't hype. This is architecture. Ripple didn't just build a payment platform. They built a foundation, one that the current monetary system is now adopting brick by brick. But here's what they didn't tell you. While institutions slowly step into this framework, the price of XRP is still being suppressed by outdated narratives, delayed clarity, and fear. This lag is your window, because once adoption catches up to utility, once the floodgates of institutional settlement open, the XRP of today will not resemble the XRP of tomorrow. We are watching the monetary stack shift, and Ripple is in the room. This isn't about speculation anymore. It's about positioning. If you're just watching headlines, you're already behind. But if you're studying infrastructure, you're early. Ripple has gone from courtroom battles to boardroom briefings. XRP has gone from being mocked to being modeled into modern policy frameworks. The ones who laughed, They're silent now. Because they see it too, the blueprint is unfolding. So now it's your move. Don't just scroll. Don't just nod along. Take action. Dive into the documentation, understand the technology, and position yourself before the rest of the world catches on. Because by the time the government tells you it's real, it's already too late. Subscribe, stay informed, and stay dangerous. Your edge isn't hype. It's foresight.